I had 152 Grand Prix and won five. It was in a period where motor racing was a very dangerous occupation. But at the time we were doing it in the best cars and with the highest technology, the best safety. It was a fantastic period. And I think the time that I was in Formula One for 10 seasons, 73 through to the end of 83, if you imagine what the technologies were at the sort of end of the sort of 72, 73, beginning of 74, pretty conventional race cars, big rear wheels and tires, tiny front wheels and tires, very rudimentary aerodynamics, and progressing through that 70s period. Then Colin Chapman comes along with ground effects. Renault introduced turbocharging. Carbon fibre gets introduced in 81 by John Barnard. I mean, it was a period of enormous technological change. And I'm very happy and proud to be in a part of that period. And again, it was a period where not just the technology was changing. At the 78 Swedish Grand Prix, and I was driving for Bernie, and Nicky was, again, we were teammates on two different occasions. The first was at Brabham. And Bernie said, Watson, you and Herbie, there's a guy called Sid Watkins. He's a doctor. I want you to meet him at the airport and take him to the circuit. I said, what's all this about? Just do what you're told. Just do what you're told. And that was a fundamental part of a change within the structure of the organisation of Formula One. And Sid Watkins, Professor Sid Watkins, became the Formula One technical delegate, eventually within the FIA. And because Bernie had looked around and realised that Formula One needed to have somebody there who could draw in the strings of not just circuit design or circuit safety, but also in the aftermath of an incident, that the medical side of Formula One could be raised to a more consistent level and not have this sort of ad hoc level that it was at, where you would have a variation between nation or hospital within the locale of a Grand Prix circuit. And that was one of the most fundamental things that ever occurred in Formula One, the appointment of Sid Watkins. And Bernie said to Herbie and me, pick him up at the airport. His name's Watkins, Professor Watkins. Take him to the circuit, show him around, in the way that Bernie does.
John, as you say, you lived in a very dangerous era, and there were other accidents. Heinz Hoffer's very sad accident,
Yes.
Road accident. You lost a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues. What is your approach to life these days, having lived through that and continuing to live through the ups and downs and the vicissitudes of life?
Extreme caution, believe it or not. I mean, obviously, as you get older, you think differently. When you're young, and I think the period for a racing driver, and having had 10 seasons in Formula One, I don't have any desire to be a racing driver. And I know that there are opportunities, if I so wish to exploit them, especially in historic racing, which is very popular right now. I mean, some beautiful cars are raced, but I raced principally in single-seaters and to a lesser degree in world sports cars. I've got no desire to go back into one of those cars and go out racing, partly because I'm now at a point in my life where my passion actually is angling and fishing. My life has been motor racing, it still is. And I did drive, up until a couple of years ago, a race or a car called an A1 GP car, which was in effect a very similar car to a Grand Prix car of my time. And that was to do a sighting lap at the events that we were covering for television. But I'm not a racing driver anymore. And while I may have the instincts, the intuition and the competitiveness within me, I know that my time was from the early 70s up until 1990, when I effectively retired. Having had a career as a Grand Prix driver and sports car racing, I'm comfortable with that. I have got no desire to jump into an historic race car, because that's really all that would be available. I've done it. I've loved it. It's been my life. It is still my life. But I'd rather now go back down to the beach at Bognor Regis on a good spring tide, a late evening, early nighttime spring tide, end of May, June, do a bit of beach casting. It's just, that's where you've moved into.
John, you were very close to Nicky during his comeback into Formula One. You were very close to Alan Prost in the early days of his career. What do you think about Michael's comeback?
Well, I'm a Michael fan. I think it's been extremely tough, and I think taking out 3 years, as he did do, and I mean, I was never happy with him going riding motorbikes. And as a former 7-time world champion, riding a motorcycle, be it a super sport bike as he was doing, or even a MotoGP bike, is diametrically opposite to driving a Grand Prix car. And he was using his Grand Prix experience riding a motorbike. And I know that because Jeremy McWilliams, who was a well-known a Grand Prix winner in MotoGP and in other forms of motorcycle racing, helped Michael on occasions. And Michael would ride the motorbike, come to a corner, stand the thing in its nose, and then just throw it into a corner. With a motorbike, you don't do that. You've got to blend it into the corner. So when he came back, clearly the car last year was very much still the legacy of the Brawn era, 2009. And Michael didn't get on with the car, but principally he didn't get on with the way tyre development had gone. And one of Michael's great strengths was having the group of Ferrari with Ross Brawn and Jean Todt, but having the influence with the tyre development, be it Michelin or be it Bridgestone, being able to influence so many factors to work in his favour. And he wasn't able to do that in 2010. This year, he's begun to look like the Michael Schumacher that I remember. I would love to see Michael win a race on merit, not maybe win it on a wet, dry race or through other circumstances, because he still is a very, very capable racing driver. The thing that I think he's found difficult in those 3 years out is that, first of all, Sebastian Vettel, 2-time world champion, unbelievable. Wasn't doing Formula One when Michael was there. Lewis Hamilton, 1-time world champion, wasn't racing when Michael was racing. So many youngsters have come in, and since Michael retired in 2006 till his return in they just see him as a scalp. And if he tries to intimidate them, they just think, who's this idiot? What's he trying to do? Is he mad? And so all the things that Michael had, all the tools that he had available to him, which he used effectively in his career, suddenly they weren't being effective. He wasn't getting the benefits out of it. And he made some errors at times and some poor judgments. But fundamentally, I think he's still a capable competitor. And I would love to see him win another Grand Prix. I think winning a world championship would be a real leap of faith, and he would have to be in an exceptionally competitive car. And he would have to have a teammate that might be compliant, as he did do when he was particularly at Ferrari. But certainly a Grand Prix win, I think, would be possible. And personally, I'd love to see it.
Which driver from your era did you respect the most, and in hindsight, do you respect the most?
Well, I mean, we talked about Nicky, and Nicky is an exceptionally clever man. He's a very capable politician, as well as being an outstanding race driver. And you don't win world championships by just being a nice guy. And one of the real wake-up calls that I had was in 1978 when Nicky came into Brabham. I naively thought that having a teammate was about equality and openness and fairness. And the way that you are successful is not simply on the track. The track is the final part of the equation. It's what you do away from the track and how you can work within the team and how you can draw those people around you. And you can look around in current Formula One and you can see it certainly what Alonso does at Ferrari, what Vettel has done at Red Bull, what Lewis had done at McLaren, and Jenson now seems to be taking that mantle. And Nicky certainly had that capacity. And in fact, when I went to Brabham, or when Nicky came to Brabham, Bernie said, "What do you think about Nicky as a teammate?" I said, "Bernie, I have no problem. As long as you can undertake that we'll have equal equipment, I'm more than happy with anybody." Midway through the season, I went to Bernie and said, "Look, I'm not feeling I'm getting the treatment that you indicated I would be getting." And I said, we're going to be joint number ones and whatever. But Bernie said, well, when he turned around to his PN, Anne, get Watson's contract out, get Lauda's contract out, tear them up, and make Watson number one and make Lauda number two. Officially, you're number one now. That's okay. He said, "Listen, John, let me just tell you something. What's on a bit of paper is important, but it isn't the factor that draws one driver into a position of power in a team. It's how you do all the things we just talked about." And that's the skill that Nicky had, and that's what makes drivers effective. It's not just quite simply being a hot rod. And Nicky had it, Alain Prost had it, Ayrton Senna had it, Michael Schumacher has it. Sebastian Vettel has it, and others. And it's not by chance that they have it. They understand, and it's the ability to integrate and work with people and generate the desire, because maybe I had expected the motivation to come from the team to inspire me or to give me that support, whereas actually, in reality, the team seek from the driver the thing that I was seeking from the team. And those are the drivers that lead. And to me, the great drivers are the ones that can win a world championship, not on just one team, but win it in multiple teams. And Nicky's done that, both at Ferrari and McLaren. Michael's done it at Benetton and at Ferrari. Alain did it at McLaren and then at Williams. And that's my benchmark. And if you take someone like Fangio, who won 5 world championships in 4 different teams, well, the greatest driver ever.
Who is the fastest Formula One driver today, right now?
Well, it's difficult to say, because if you're never going to put everybody in one car for a start off. The 2 things that are always been impressive, I think Lewis clearly has got out and out raw speed. He may not necessarily be able to get it out of the car as well as Jenson does at points, and I think that's been one of the drawbacks that Lewis has had to deal with. But what Sebastian Vettel has done in Brazil, he dragged time out of the car. In fact, his teammate Mark Webber was only within 1,000th or so of a second, but because Vettel got into just below the 72-second time barrier, it was one of those magical laps, and it was a wonderful lap to watch. So I think Sebastian Vettel is pretty impressive. The driver who I look to, I suppose my favourite driver currently would be Fernando Alonso. I think that he encompasses all the elements and the qualities that a great driver needs to have. And he's now got that other thing called maturity, which is something that you have to earn, you can't buy it. And in a similar vein, that Jenson's done that as well at McLaren. And I didn't imagine when Jenson went to McLaren that he would be able to consolidate his position in the team in the manner that he has done. I thought he was going to be cannon fodder for Lewis. And in fact, it's looking now that Jenson is the man that the team look to for the direction in which they want the team to be travelling.
John, as ever, a great pleasure talking to you. We could talk for hours.
There's lots of things to talk about.